Well, I have had a lot to say, if you have been watching Fox and if you've been reading my columns, about Sean Penn and the Rolling Stone interview with El Chapo, and then Penn going on 60 Minutes the other night and ripping journalists. He talked about the sad state of journalism. Man, we just don't get it. And then he talked about how journalists are just jealous of him for scoring this huge exclusive. I'll come back to that in a moment. But I got an email from Bernie Silverman, who says, I generally enjoy your commentary, but lecturing non-journalists about journalistic standards at this point in time vis-a-vis Sean Penn entails a bit of chutzpah. I don't particularly care about Penn one way or another, and like many, don't see him as an authority on anything other than perhaps acting or Madonna. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has had hundreds of interviews with hundreds of professional, quote, professional journalists during the last several months, and is yet to answer in any depth for both the basics of his past and qualifications to be president. All he does is conduct one-way communications, which serve as verbal press releases. Well, first of all, Bernie, it's not the first time I've been accused of chutzpah. That tends to happen when you are somebody who pops off on television. Interesting that you would compare the Sean Penn situation to the Trump situation. So Sean Penn first. Look, of course he's not a journalist, and he's right on one point. You don't need a license to be a journalist, but he was acting in a journalistic capacity when he not only met with El Chapo and sent those questions, which had to be translated, and wrote this hugely sympathetic 10,000-word piece published in a major magazine, the subject of major controversy in the country. And yet, it really wasn't Penn's decision, it was Rolling Stone's decision to give El Chapo, this mass murderer, this notorious international drug kingpin, veto power over the article. And I guess Penn's decision to write about how he is a Robin Hood-like figure and he's a figure in Mexican folklore, despite the fact that by the article's own admission, he kills people in the process of doing business. It was a ridiculously soft piece. And I wasn't lecturing Sean Penn. I don't really care about Sean Penn. I was trying to explain to people that if you're going to act as a journalist, maybe you ought to at least observe the basic ethical standards of the profession. As far as Donald Trump, obviously you don't like Trump's answers, but he has put himself out there with hundreds and hundreds of interviews with all kinds of shows, and not just entertainment shows. He does he's done 3 interviews with me so far. He has done O'Reilly many times and Greta many times, and he's done Morning Joe, and he's done all the Sunday shows. He's done Chris Wallace, he's done Chuck Todd, John Dickerson, and the rest, George Stephanopoulos. So it isn't that we don't press him on these things. Maybe you don't like these answers. Your little shot at, quote, professional journalists. Look, Trump has a way of, like any political figure, of answering what he wants to answer and deflecting the rest. But I've pressed him time and again, as have many others, on his change of position since the 1990s when he was sort of a liberal Democrat in New York, giving lots of money to Democratic office holders, including Hillary, who was at his wedding. And I've pressed Trump, and others have pressed Trump, on the specifics of his positions on immigration, on entitlement programs, and all of that. But the one thing you can't take away from Trump is that he puts himself out there and he takes the toughest questions by the so-called journalists and answers them in a way that still has him as the unquestioned front runner in this Republican race. Sean Penn is in a different category. He's an actor. But man, the idea that we were all jealous of Sean Penn and that's why we were criticizing him, talk about not getting it.